Today in Across the Fence, an unprecedented presentation of a Picasso painting. We'll visit the University of Vermont's Fleming Museum, where one of Picasso's most famous paintings is coming to life. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The Fleming Museum at UVM is Vermont's leading museum of art and world cultures. In addition to its permanent collection of 25,000 objects from around the world, the museum hosts 9 special exhibitions each year. This spring, they include Vermont Civil War artifacts and photographs taken by a Vermont doctor in the aftermath of World War II. We'll see those exhibits in just a moment, but we begin with a unique story of a Picasso masterpiece. Here's Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin.
Something's missing at a new exhibit at the University of Vermont's Fleming Museum.
It's a show that is about a painting without having the painting in the museum.
Fleming director Jeannie Cohen has been researching and writing about Pablo Picasso throughout her career. 5 years ago, she began a research project focusing on one of Picasso's major pieces. As that project came to a close, Cohen was faced with the challenge of how to share her work with the community.
What I do with scholarship, I like to share with the public. But there's no way that we can get that painting because it never leaves the Museum of Modern Art, ever. So initially we thought, okay, I thought I won't do an exhibition. But then in talking to colleagues and co-workers, I began to see it as kind of a challenge. Maybe we can do something very, very different here.
And something different is what Cohen and her colleagues at the Fleming have done.
The focus of the show is Demoiselle d'Avignon, painted in 1907 by Picasso when he was 25 years old. And the exhibition looks at it from a number of different ways and uses advanced technology, again, in a number of different ways to help create an atmosphere, to get information across, to kind of recreate the ambiance and the historical context for the painting.
Technology is used throughout the exhibit. A life-size projection of the painting stands against one wall, next to a video projection that recreates Picasso's studio. Cohen worked with local artists who created sound and video components for the show.
An area where we have iPads where you can access augmented reality. So if you look at the projection of the painting, or you look at another reproduction of an earlier drawing that's on the wall, it will trigger all of the studies for the painting. And Picasso did over 700 studies, so you can aim it at a particular figure in the painting and see all the studies for that figure, or you can aim it at the projection of the painting and see all of the studies for the whole composition.
The piece was created during a transitional time for Picasso. He had arrived in Paris 5 years earlier and was eagerly trying to establish himself in the art world.
Picasso was like a sponge. He looked to the history of art and the history of cultures, and he borrowed a lot of elements and a lot of ideas, and then he kind of synthesized them all and transformed them into what was a very radical depiction of 5 women, 5 prostitutes, as it turns out, in a brothel, to create what was an extremely outrageous painting at the time, and turned out to be what we now call the cornerstone of modern art.
The controversy stirred up by the painting is also present in the show. Standing in front of the projection of Picasso's studio, the viewer hears reactions to the painting.
Frightful.
Like drinking kerosene in order to spit fire.
He vowed that he would find some means to sink Picasso.
If you're standing in front of the projection of the painting, you hear a number of the original comments by his friends and colleagues and competitors when they first saw the painting in 1907. It was absolutely negative. They were outraged. It was, it was an affront to art. And, they said things like, this is the end of French painting, and, the women are monstrous. And someone said, we'll find him hanged behind his easel. So it was outrageous just to look at it at that point.
The show is entitled Staring Back. It also features work in various mediums by contemporary artists in response to Picasso's piece. One canvas depicts Picasso's studio in 1908. Well, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon was in it. Another is a life-size recreation of the painting, with one male subject standing in for all of the females. And nearby, an artist has removed the figures completely and shows just the cubist and fragmented background.
That's really what the show is about, is Picasso's creative process and the creative process of contemporary artists looking back at his. So in titling the show Staring Back, I'm looking at Picasso staring back at art history, right, and creating the painting. I'm thinking about the women in it staring back at the viewer. I'm thinking about the contemporary artist staring back at Picasso. So really looking at the creative process and having an opportunity just to go deeply into one painting and to really understand that better. And then also to experience new technologies. So we're kind of doing this in the spirit of Picasso's, what he brought to art, which was revolutionary, and looking at the tools that we have now and that artists are using now.
Bringing together art and technology to tell the story of a painting that changed the art world over 100 years ago and still resonates today. And although it is not here, there is nothing missing from the show. At the Fleming Museum, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Joining me now is the director of the Fleming Museum and curator of the Picasso exhibition, Janie Cohen. Nice to see you again. Now, professionally, you've researched, studied, and published about Picasso for more than 30 years. At what point did you envision this particular exhibit?
I think it was about 2 years ago, and I was in the throes of doing research on the painting. And I began to realize that we actually could do an exhibition without the painting, but that we needed the right kind of creative collaborators to do it. The idea came up pretty quickly that technology was going to play a big role in it.
It's so interesting. Do you think that this is going to now be a new way to think of an exhibition in the future, is maybe you don't need to show the exact piece?
Well, that's a good question, and it's very important to stand in front of an actual artwork. But in some cases where the work isn't available, or for instance what we've done with the drawings, with all the studies, you have an opportunity to bring in, to basically import a body of work that is not otherwise accessible. It's really valuable, educationally and otherwise.
Well, I think you learn much more about that particular painting than you would if it was one of several you were looking at an exhibit.
Exactly.
So give us some further insight into the collaboration that it took to make this happen.
So early on, I brought in two artists, both UVM alum, Coberlin Brownell, and Jen Carson. Jen is a sound artist, and Kobe is a graphic designer and visual artist, and both of them use technology in their work. So what I was really worried about, I felt like the pitfalls in the project was, on one hand, to be kind of too didactic, and on the other hand, for it to be too much spectacle, almost kind of Disneyland-like. So I felt that with working with artists, we would really be able to navigate that, using technology. So these two have been fantastic to work with.
And so what's been people's reaction when they sort of experience this?
It's been very positive, and I think I was worried a little about potential disappointment that the piece wasn't in the museum, but people have been very excited about this and about the opportunity to interact with technology in this way. So it's been great, in all ages.
Yeah, so what is it about Picasso that keeps people talking about him nearly 50 years after his death?
That's a great question. I feel like he's kind of, it's an endless source of artistic fascination. I mean, he was so visually curious and complex, and you begin to look into it. I refer to it as the Picasso rabbit hole. Once you kind of start down that path in terms of trying to understand his work, it just goes deeper and deeper, and it's fascinating and rewarding.
As I mentioned in the beginning of the program, there are other special exhibitions at the Fleming throughout the year, and currently one of them is about Civil War objects from Vermont. What's in that exhibit, and where do all these things come from?
So these are all University of Vermont collections. So the Fleming Museum's collection, special collections at Bailey Howe Library, and the Dana Medical Library. So we brought together objects that really talk about Vermont's, Vermont's place in the war, and it's a pretty rich and interesting collection altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it involves a lot of different items. Some we're seeing, some of the items here, but also things from the home front, which is kind of ties it together and makes people realize that it was, not just soldiers that went off to war, but families.
Families,
involved.
Absolutely, and people held on to these objects for years, and then brought them to their local museum. Yeah.
So one of the unique aspects of the Fleming is how the exhibits and collections are used in undergraduate education as well.
Correct. So we have a lot of classes coming in, not just from departments that you might expect, like art history and anthropology, but from across campus. So College of Engineering, nursing, College of Medicine. Students use the museum in different ways.
And so is that something that's ongoing all the time?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And we also have student interns and work study students, so there's always a lot of students in the museum.
You have a special guest coming to the museum in May to talk about Vermont and the Civil War, and I could listen to this man talk all day.
Yes, Howard Coffin. We're very, very excited about this, yeah.
And so there's a second war-related exhibit at the museum this spring, and it comes from the Second World War, and it's a story that's just coming to light after more than 60 years.
Right. This is the work of Dr. Herbert Durfee, who lived and worked in Burlington for most of his career. He was a OBGYN, and I think delivered half of the people walking around Burlington today. But he took photographs in Europe from 1951 to 53. He was based in Wiesbaden, Germany, and they had not been printed. I mean, a few of them along the way, but his son, Eleazar Durfee, began looking at the negatives and began printing them, and came up with what was just a spectacular body of work that we're really pleased to show.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that these pictures tell? What stories do they tell?
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, you see these empty streets of Europe. It's a Europe that we've never experienced. Most of us, absolutely beautiful photographs. You don't see a lot of ruins. I mean, he really focused on the beauty that he found in post-war Europe, but they're really, really unusual, beautiful photographs.
It's almost as if, they're photographs someone would take on vacation.
Right, exactly.
Not sort of documenting a war, but documenting a vacation.
Yeah, absolutely, but also with a very artistic eye.
And so the Fleming has art and culture from around the world, but there's also an emphasis on Vermont. Tell us a little bit about your ongoing Contemporary Voices of Vermont.
So this is a project that we've been doing for a number of years in our balcony gallery, which is primarily early 20th century New England and mostly Vermont artists. And as of probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we started borrowing 3 paintings a year by contemporary Vermont artists and placing them in the context of our permanent collection.
Mm-hmm. And what's been the reaction?
People have been loving it, and it's such a great perspective because there's so many ties to the historical work, but also you get this shock of the new in a way.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to see all the colors and different landscapes and different items that are there.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if people want to learn about the different exhibitions that are currently at the museum, what should they do?
They can go to our website, flemingmuseum.org, or call the museum, and we are always there and happy to answer questions.
And when going back to the Picasso exhibition, if folks are a little intimidated by some of the modern appliances, there are people that can help them through that.
Yes, our work study students are more than happy to help them interact with the technology.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.